In the small, sun bleached town of Slaughter, Louisiana, where porches lean into quiet afternoons and everyone knows the names of their neighbors, there once lived a girl named Lacey Ellen Fletcher. To those who remember her from childhood, she was bright and curious, the kind of child who stayed late after volleyball practice just to help collect the nets, who blushed when her teachers praised her handwriting. Her classmates at Brownsville Baptist Academy remember a girl who smiled easily, who seemed happiest when the world around her felt small and safe. Lacey was born on November 25th, 1985, the only daughter of Clay and Sheila Fletcher, a pair of well regarded residents in the tight knit community of East Feliciana Parish. Her parents were known in local circles. Clay worked in civic life, and Sheila was involved with the church. To the world outside, they were soft spoken, polite, the kind of family one might describe as respectable. Behind the door of their tidy home on Tom Drive, though, the world Lacey inhabited was growing smaller by the year. As she moved into adolescence, her parents began to notice changes that they didn't fully understand. Once social and quick to laugh, Lacey became anxious, withdrawn. She found eye contact difficult and social gatherings exhausting. A diagnosis followed: autism spectrum disorder, though the terminology of the time blurred and softened it, calling it severe social anxiety. The teachers tried to accommodate her, but by her mid teens, Clay and Sheila decided to withdraw her from school altogether, explaining to friends that she would finish her education at home. For a while, the decision seemed benign. Homeschooling gave Lacey structure, safety, and the predictability she craved. But isolation is a slow creeping thing. It begins as comfort and ends as confinement. Years passed, and little by little, the world beyond the front door ceased to matter. Lacey stopped joining her parents on errands. Then she stopped leaving her room. Then even the stairs became too far. The couch in the living room, brown, leather, ordinary, became her place. At first, it was simply where she read or watched television, but soon it became her entire world. Somewhere along the way, perhaps around 2010, but perhaps earlier, Lacey stopped getting up. Her body, like her mind, began to succumb to stillness. She sat and sat and sat until the act of moving at all became unbearable. Her parents claimed later that she refused to leave the couch, that she would panic if they urged her to move. They said the couch was her sanctuary, her comfort zone. But that sanctuary would become a tomb. The rest of the house remained clean and orderly. The grass was trimmed, the kitchen neat, the dishes washed. To a neighbor glancing through the window, nothing looked amiss. Yet the living room, where Lacey lived and died, had begun to decay around her. Towels were spread around her so she could relieve herself without moving. Food was brought to her where she sat. And as the years slipped by, her muscles atrophied, her skin broke down, her wounds deepened. The air grew heavy with a smell her parents somehow learned to live with. By 2010, a psychologist who met with Clay and Sheila, but not with Lacey herself, recommended hospitalization. But that never happened. The family said she refused. They said she didn't want doctors or hospitals, and so they let her stay. For 12 years, she stayed. No one outside the home saw her again. The neighbors assumed she'd moved out, maybe gone to college, maybe living in another city. The Fletchers continued to attend church, to chat with friends at the store. Their lives outwardly appeared steady, but inside the house, their daughter was fading, body and soul, sinking into the couch that she never left. And by the time the call came, it was already too late. On January 3rd, 2022, just after sunrise, Sheila Fletcher dialed 911. Her voice, by accounts from dispatchers, was calm. She said her daughter wasn't breathing. When first responders arrived, they stepped into a scene that many of them would later say would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In the living room, surrounded by the relics of ordinary domestic life, a lamp, a television, a family photo, was a body so ravaged by neglect that it defied understanding. Lacey lay sunken into the couch's disintegrating leather, her skin literally fused to the cushions. She weighed just 96 pounds. Her hair was matted, her face skeletal. The floor was covered with feces and urine. Maggots moved in open wounds. In some places, bone showed through ulcers that had eaten deep into her flesh. The coroner, Dr. Ewell Bickman, declared it one of the most horrifying deaths he'd ever seen. The cause, sepsis, brought on by chronic medical neglect. She'd been left to die slowly, inch by inch, over more than a decade. Neighbors were stunned. Clay and Sheila once said to a reporter, they were the kind of people you'd trust with your house keys. But when the coroner's findings became public, the facade of respectability crumbled. In May 2022, the Fletchers were arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The photographs from inside the home, withheld from public release but described in court, made seasoned investigators weep. If you had a horse in the barn behind your house, said District Attorney Sam Diakela, and the flesh was gone from its body, you wouldn't even treat your animal like that. The coroner added that Laci had likely not moved from that spot for at least 12 years. Now, the defense called it love gone wrong. Their lawyer said the parents loved her to death. They claimed they had tried in their own way to care for her. They insisted she was of sound mind, that she chose to remain where she was. But prosecutors rejected that argument. A person who cannot walk, who is covered in sores and infections, cannot meaningfully choose to stay that way. They chose the path of least resistance, the DA said. They let her rot rather than face the discomfort of confronting reality. As the case proceeded, the Fletchers sat silently in court, hands clasped, heads bowed. Reporters described them as gray haired, ordinary, unremarkable. And that, perhaps, was the most chilling part. Monsters rarely look monstrous. In February 2024, after 2 years of pretrial motions, they pleaded no contest to manslaughter. In March, Judge Catherine Betsy Jones pronounced their sentence, 40 years each, with 20 suspended, meaning 20 years in prison and 5 on supervised probation. Her words would cut through the courtroom like glass. This was a tragedy. The truth is that Laci laid on a couch and slowly died because she got no medical or mental health care. Outside the courthouse, the town of Slaughter was left to grapple with what had happened in its midst. Some neighbors spoke of forgiveness, but others said forgiveness was impossible. The church the Fletchers once attended split in quiet dismay, some members reaching out to them and others turning away. In interviews, former classmates of Laci's struggled to reconcile the girl they'd known with the woman she became. She was always so sweet, one said. She always wanted to be a part of things. And this story drew national attention, but not because it was a mystery. There was no question of who did it. The horror of Lacey Fletcher's death lay in its duration, the slow violence of neglect, the silence that stretched along 12 long years. To imagine her final decade is to imagine the sound of nothing. No laughter, no conversation, only the hum of the television and the breath of 2 parents passing by, pretending not to see what was right before them. It is to imagine what happens when love becomes paralysis, when pity becomes permission, even when care becomes cruelty through inaction. Laci's name now stands as kind of a shorthand for systemic failure, not just parental, but communal, medical, and institutional. How could someone just vanish so completely in plain sight? Where were the doctors, the friends, the neighbors, the social workers? No one knocked on the door for 12 years. That home on Tom Drive was eventually emptied, sold, and forgotten. But the couch, that dark, ruined artifact, became a symbol, a grotesque monument to what happens when the world and sometimes caregivers stop paying attention. And yet, beneath the horror, there are remains of the memory of the child Laci once was, the girl who laughed on the volleyball court, who loved her church, who smiled in her school photo. She deserved so much more than what she got. A life cut short not by violence of rage, but by the slow, suffocating absence of care. In remembering her, we are forced to confront uncomfortable truths that neglect can wear the face of love, that isolation can hide behind respectability, and silence can be as deadly as cruelty. Her story is not only about a single home in rural Louisiana, it's about every unseen person left behind in the quiet spaces of society. Lacey Ellen Fletcher's life ended where it had been lived, on that couch, in the middle of a living room meant for living. She died there because the people who loved her most failed to understand that love is not enough, that love without care, without action, without courage becomes neglect. And so, in the end, the story of Lacey is not only one of death, but of erasure, of how a bright young woman disappeared inch by inch until only her absence remained. Her story asks us to remember her not for the way she was found, but for the way she should have been seen all along.
Hey everyone. So my name is Stories, and this is my part of talking about Lacey's murder, in my personal opinion. I did write notes, so you might see me go to this. I'm still learning. I am working on getting to the point where Erin's at. So bear with me, and thanks so much for being here. If you like the content so far, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay, so Lacey had spent more than half her life on the couch, on her couch. At the young age of 36 years old, she was pronounced dead January 3rd of 2022. Her last known doctor visit was in 2010, and she had literally rotted to death on her couch. Actually, if you see the pictures, I just recently saw the pictures, which were hard. Like, she seeped through, and you could see that she was in a laying down position. She had maggots in her hair, she had ulcers, she was in her own feces. So her parents literally just let her rot and die there for over a decade. And her parents had called in a little over 10 years later to say, my daughter stopped breathing, to the police. In my personal opinion, they had plenty of time to plan, to decide whether they were going to call the police in the first place or do really anything about it. They did have the choice, in my personal opinion, to bury the body or hide things. I think there was too much evidence on the couch itself that they probably would have had to burn the couch if they wanted to hide more of the evidence and not go to prison for 20 years, which I feel isn't enough time considering the situation. On the situation, I feel like she was coerced into staying in on the couch. And how to go into that, let's first cover her disabilities. So first, she had agoraphobia, which is this fear of being in crowds, which when you go out in public in any situation, like grocery store or just to your job, if you have a job as a disabled person, you are near crowds of people. So agoraphobia was one of her disabilities. Her other was autism. I don't know where cognitively she stands on the spectrum, but autism is pretty much a language difference and disability in language with fear of rejection in social situations. That is a part of autism that people don't talk about all the time. So she had two social, to me personally, social anxieties that did affect her ability to go out in public, to exist. And if she had the proper support, I feel like she would have gone out in public more and tried doing things and then going back into the house, onto the couch, her safe space. But if you don't have that support, of course, you're going to stay in the same spot without movement. That's coercive control, making you feel less than and unworthy of life, which, in my personal opinion, letting your child rot and die without proper just bringing a wipe over and cleaning and changing her if she needed that, and with reminders to go to the bathroom. Just simple things like that could have helped her even not stay in her feces and had a pleasant life. They could have also taken her to a home where they could take care of her 24/7 and change her, and she could find a new safe space there and work on socializing there. There's a lot of things that could have gone into play. They said that she chose to stay in the couch, but even if she chose to stay in the couch, as caregivers, their job is to care for their daughter in one sense or another, whether that's cleaning her, changing her, feeding her. By the evidence I've seen, it seems like she was starved to death. 96 pounds. They could have done a lot, in my personal opinion. Okay, let's continue. And by the way, autism is a neurotypical disorder. So it's not a mental health thing. It becomes mental health when you're in burnout phase. That's where most autistic individuals end up needing a lot of mental health, is when they are in burnout. And what I mean by burnout, so autistic and ADHDers go through this too. Autistic burnout is when you just completely shut down and can't function at all as a human, whether that's speaking, moving. Maybe she was an autistic burnout from just trying to live. I don't know. I wasn't there, but with the scene of things, it's a possibility. Now let's continue. And on top of that, so there's a language difference between a neurodivergent versus a neurotypical. A neurodivergent takes one word, so like connection. I consider that friendship. I don't think of it in any other sense, a connection. To a neurotypical, that might mean like a romantic way. I don't know. Just in my experience, it seems like most of them take it that way, and it's just weird. But we all have our different forms of speaking, and because language is hard in the first place as an autistic person, some do a really great job. So don't get me wrong, that's why it's a spectrum. Some are brilliant in speaking, some just need work or an understanding of basic language. I have trouble with some basic words in language. So there could be a lot of miscommunication if Lacey had tried. Maybe she tried prior. I don't know if she was a late in life diagnosis or early in life diagnosis. Nowadays, for females at least, only women, it tends to be later in life diagnosis. So I don't know if she had prior help before then. I don't know her full story. The coercive control, so the basics she didn't get, cleaning, changing, bathing, food, that's coercive control. That's taking away her autonomy gradually was fading in her household on the couch for whenever her last visit was. Her last doctor's visit is, in my personal opinion, before she died, because it was 2010 and the coroner said she had been dead over a decade. So that's past 10 years mark. So you could assume or guesstimate 12 years. So I don't know how she died. I assume maybe it was in 2010. I don't actually know. I urge you to read articles. I'll leave a couple down below too. And Erin Moore have handled that side of things. And now we're going to go into why the couch was a comfort zone for her, a place of acceptance and love, because that's all you honestly need as a person of disabilities, since in the real world, there's a lot of ableism, and ableism is pretty much just being who you are. People disagree with and want you to be a certain way, so be closer to a neurotypical way. It's the best way to explain that. And it seems like her parents were actually ableist too, by letting her stay in on that couch. And I feel like they did reject her personally just for existing. Like it didn't seem like they actually wanted her and didn't actually want to help her or help her grow and be able to accept herself and find friends that are also autistic like herself. I bet she could have found a lot, and that language difference would be easier to understand each other. You'll get to see that in an interview I had with the AUDHDer herself. Her and I, even though we have a language difference still as autistic individuals, we still are able to meet each other right in the middle and have things in common. I feel like she probably didn't feel like she had a way out in her home if they were rejecting her constantly or making her feel less than. And when I say less than, like not worthy of existing, not worthy of food, not worthy of bathing, not worthy of basic needs of changing and bathroom. So now we're actually going to go into true crime when it comes to disabled individuals. So these are really sad statistics, but it's true. And to add to this, so you guys understand, the topic I'll be handling on this channel is underreported in the first place. So that's why I'll also be doing documentaries, even documentaries that aren't true crime. But the statistics are a disabled person is 4 times more likely to be murdered or violently killed, I guess, as a victim in a crime case than those who are able-bodied. And 83 point, oh man, I thought I memorized it. 83.3% are in violent victimizations that have a cognitive disability are killed, versus those with other disabilities are 23.6% chance to 47.6%. And just so you know, disabled humans that are already disabled don't become disabled later in life. That's different. We make up 16% of the population of the entire Earth. 16%. That's not a very large percentage, but there's a larger percentage of murders and undocumented cases besides the ones you hear about in the paper, if you hear about it on the news or on YouTube, on here, YouTube, anywhere. I have a feeling that it is a higher rate than what it shows. I could see even for those who are with other disabilities being in the 80s themselves too. But again, this is underdocumented, so not too many people call in or say anything or tell authorities because of the bias that exists already of seeing someone with disabilities as less than human, not even human, which is sad. In this case, I feel like the police didn't consider Lacey's life and her death. They didn't consider the fact that, in my personal opinion, she was murdered by her parents. I personally believe they deserved life in prison, not 20 years. They took a life. Why should they still be able to have a chance of living? They took their own child's life. So the police were contemplating whether this is a family tragedy or a murder. To me, the evidence was straightforward and there, but me being autistic and seeing the pattern within. So to me, it was murder. And I wish they would have looked deeper into the case and given justice, because I personally feel this case didn't get any justice. And there could have been a prevention, which Erin and I will talk about the interview portion of this. So from here, I'm going to let Erin take it. Thanks so much for sticking with me, and I'll be doing more of these. Thank you guys.
Is there anything you want to like? I'm just trying to think of like transitioning from. Are you putting it all in one video?
Yeah, I'll put it
Okay.
all in one video.
So are you gonna want a transition, or should we just jump into the questions? Because I guess the first question is kind of a transition. Before we talk about Lacey's story, can you tell me a little bit about what motivated you to want to cover it?
I wanted to cover it due to the fact I didn't like the way everyone was covering it in the first place, whether it was the news or fellow, I guess, true crime, since I'm gradually working my way into that true crime people covering it. They were focusing on things that really don't matter in the long run, just focusing on only the couch. What's the purpose of the couch? Why is she there? Would be better ones versus just, oh, horrifying. Let's focus on her death and only her death. And I didn't watch too many because I couldn't handle the way it was covered, because I feel it didn't give her life justice, that she was just this person that's disabled that died on the couch, is my personal opinion and how I felt.
Yeah, and I remember like not wanting to hear it too, because it just sounded like, even in certain like thumbnails, I would kind of assume what happened, and before having all the context of her diagnosis and the neglect, it was like so I like true crime, but if it gets too gruesome to me, I can't, like, so it just felt like when things are just salaciously covered, I kind of have a hard time, because I'm like, I want to learn about how that got to that point. I don't really necessarily want to like stick, like, I understand that that's how people get the view, but it's also like exploitative in my opinion, because you shouldn't be covering true crime just to get views. You should be covering, in my opinion, you should be covering the true crime to be like, how can we warn other people about this? How can we, support other disabled people in our communities? Things like that. So it's like just a hard story. Even when I was like researching it and even recording it, I like started getting emotional, because it's a hard story to talk about. So I guess when you first heard about it, what stood out to you the most?
That she was disabled and that her caregivers, so parents, just let her rot and die pretty much on the couch. That's what caught me, not what everyone, I guess, focused on. Just that fact.
So I feel like I already know the answer to this question. Do you think the public conversation around this case has been fair at all to people with autism or disabilities?
No, I don't honestly think so, because there is so much misinformation in the first place out there on autism that still is circulating. Most people, even I, before my diagnosis, didn't have the basic education on autism. I had to actually get the diagnosis, the clinical, I guess I should say, diagnosis of autism, because the correct information is not out there. Most of the misinformation they have, even whether it's a book that you learn in school, unless you're autistic yourself, you don't have the true information. So there's so much misinformation, and the focus is on the misinformation. So if you want to learn, actually learn from someone who is autistic, is my advice.
Yeah. And I feel like, especially now, unfortunately, there's such a like vast lack of understanding of autism and almost like demonization of people who are on the spectrum. Like, you know, we have some of the discourse coming out right now, and I just feel like it's almost just so mean-spirited to treat people on the spectrum. I mean, it is mean-spirited to make people feel like it's such a terrible, terrible, terrible diagnosis. Like, we have the whole controversy with Tylenol and stuff right now, and I'm like, why are we messaging to people? Because people with autism are still smart people. They can still hear what you're saying, and you're basically saying that it's a massive, massive problem when it's a full spectrum, and there are beautiful, loving, smart, successful people who happen to also have autism. Do you think that that kind of negative point of view of autistic people played a part in this case not necessarily being taken as seriously as it should have been?
Yeah, I feel like in general, in any case, if there's an autistic person involved, they're viewed in a negative light first before a positive light because of, again, the misinformation. And I would like to add that autistic people do in fact pay taxes. I pay taxes. I'm autistic. But
You also work, like,
yes, I
you contribute
might
to
not be full
society.
time, but I do in fact work. But there's also the fact that people in general that are within the disabled community, whether it's autism, cerebral palsy, there's a lot out there. Anything of a disability, whether it's physical or mental, or just learning, because there's three categories, uh, they are looked at as nothing and less than. And actually, it took up until I think it was the 1990s we started getting rights. So it wasn't too long ago. And the fact that in the, I can't say the word, in the era of white supremacy, for which I'll be covering this on my channel very soon, you don't learn this in school either. T4, I forgot the second part of the word, but they were literally eliminating anyone who was autistic, anyone who was disabled in any form, because they needed to cleanse and make people, I guess, better. And then later in time, those who were autistic ended up in asylums. So it took until about like 2000, I think 10 or 2000. I don't know the exact year for just basic human rights for individuals that are disabled to happen, and for people to not, well, we still are looked at as that way. So never mind. The views haven't changed. And if you are disabled, you're still looked upon as not great in society. So I think it plays a role in every true crime case. It plays a role in if the role is reversed. So I believe, yeah, to answer your question, sorry, I went on a rant, but yes, to
Love
answer your
it when you rant, so keep it going.
but yeah, that's how I feel about that personally.
So that does actually, it's a nice segue into the next question then, because I think it is widely agreed that there was a lot of neglect and isolation with this case. And so what does that kind of look like to you, I guess, in the broad sense of society and autistic or otherly disabled people, but also not just physical neglect, but emotional neglect, social neglect? What does it look like to you?
To me, well, social neglect is a little harder being on the autistic spectrum because most, not all, some are very, very talkative and like to be social. I'm one that gets drained really quickly socializing, so I don't go out as much, but I do socialize. Um, I feel the neglect is, well, I personally feel in this case alone that parents might have swayed her to stay in her position because maybe they were tired, or I don't know what they were feeling. because I don't feel they reported the truth, in my personal opinion, because they literally waited over a decade to report the death. So there was some planning involved, in my personal opinion. And if they didn't feel there wasn't any way out, which isn't true, there is help. Even in her state, there's still help. She could have gone into a home and could have gotten 24/7 help around the clock if that was truly the case. And if they couldn't get her moved right away, the people from wherever they were going to take her to could have come in and done that. So there's so many different solutions that could have happened. Like most deaths that I read about, since I've been reading about a lot of them as of lately in true crime and disabilities, most of them could have not happened in that death. Most of them could have been saved in some sense. And the fact that those who are, I guess this goes into socially, most people that are disabled don't have the information because people aren't meeting those with disabilities because we're apparently I don't know the word. I guess it's not easy to meet someone who's disabled where they're at. I don't know the correct words. I know with me personally, socially, that I've dealt with in work, it's why most adult autistic people don't have jobs is due to ableism. The people I worked with flat out told me that it's hard work to meet me where I'm at, and they tried to come up with a way to fire me, which is normal for an autistic person to get that. And I caught on to it. So instead, I quit before the firing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very normal. Most people don't want to meet someone, for one, if you don't look disabled, they don't want to meet you where you're at all because they, like I've actually told you, I might look like an adult and I can meet, I guess, the normal, whatever that is, normalcy of adultness to an extent. And then there's an extent where I can't, at least what looks like the norm. Like there's certain things energetically I eventually run out of being able to do and can't function. So it's like a literal stop and not able to move and function at all. So talking, moving, doing anything. So it can be something simple like doing laundry. I sometimes can't do that. Uh, I sometimes don't have words, so I can't socialize or do anything. So there's certain extents of everyday that adults do that I cannot do. And that's the same for a lot of disabled people with invisible disabilities, since mine counts as an invisible disability.
Something I have observed as someone who is not diagnosed but suspicious I'm on the spectrum in some way, so I don't want
I
to
am also suspicious of yours.
I just because I've watched, it sounds so silly in this context, but like watching Love on the Spectrum and meeting and knowing
I don't like that show, but anyways.
Okay, interesting. But also like people being more open about where on the spectrum they kind of land. Something that I've taken away is like autistic people, I feel like, are constantly trying to make sure they're meeting everybody else where everybody else is at. Constantly trying to make sure they're socializing in the right way, constantly putting in more of that effort. And it's frustrating when a, you know, quote unquote neurotypical person is unwilling to do that work also, to be like, well, I also, because I think that that's not even a part of the discussion of, is it like a neurotypical person and an autistic person interact? I think it's just human interaction at a basic level. We need to try to meet each other where we're at. So do you feel like when you hear that, it must be very, very frustrating, because I'm like, you're probably thinking, yeah, all I do all day is try to meet everybody else where they're at, and you can't meet me where I'm at. I'm exhausted.
Yes, actually, I came to that breaking point after my diagnosis. Well, actually, it took a situation for me to make it to that breaking point of I don't care anymore. I'm going to meet myself where I'm at, because most people that are disabled, you're not going to find anyone meeting you where you're at and not understanding, because there is still miscommunication, not on purpose, but just being autistic in general. You mean one thing, but it means something else in the neurotypical world.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to meet you where you're at because they don't take the time to try to meet you where you're at, and will put labels that, in my personal opinion, aren't true, that come from misinformation and come from, yeah, mainly misinformation, and not trying to learn and understand that person and truly understand them, instead of seeing them as just this disabled thing. Because I know a lot of people don't see someone who's disabled as a human being. That's why I use the word human. um, they see you as something else, like either, I guess, sometimes a show, sometimes just this thing that exists, but you don't want it to exist. At least that's some things I've felt personally from other people when I say I'm autistic, because I'm not going to hide it, especially nowadays. I'm not going to hide it at all.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you don't do that, because I think that like you don't hide it, because like I just feel like you're right. There are so many misconceptions, and I feel like most people interacting with you, they're not like, you're so open to talk about your experience. So you're a good kind of representation of, yeah, I, like we said before, I function in society. Like certain things are more difficult. I might do things in a different way, and that's okay. But I also want to, not that it's your responsibility to educate anybody, but I think that unfortunately people have a really hard time empathizing and understanding something if it's not right in front of them. And even sometimes when it is right in front of them, they learn this information or this misinformation, and they just immediately come up with a judgment. But you are someone who could totally transform someone's initial judgment, because you're willing to talk about it and help educate people and be honest with your experience, and very direct with how other people, the way they interact with you maybe, or other autistic people, is inappropriate. And you're like, I'm just direct.
yep, and blunt. A lot of people don't understand blunt honesty. That's something I've noticed too. Even if you bluntly say it straight to their face of, well, most people don't understand this, and then they go and don't understand it even after you state it, which I still don't understand that. I'm trying to really hard,
Like,
but
none of us understand anything. You don't understand. I don't understand. We don't understand.
exactly.
I think sometimes it's okay to not understand and just accept. It's okay to not like know someone's personal experience and be able to just like, not justify, to validate that experience for them and say, oh wow, now that opens my eyes to your lived experience. I want to be better. Right.
Yeah, correct. Exactly.
All right. So now let's talk a little bit about Laci.
Okay.
So Laci was isolated for years inside her parents' home. From your perspective, how does isolation affect someone on the autism spectrum?
Well, isolation can be a good thing, but it also can be detrimental to just having basic connection with other humans and getting the chance to practice socializing, whether you're great at it or not. Most, well, again, some are great, some are not great. I'm right in the center of there. But yeah, so I feel like there's a positive and a negative there, but I feel like she might have been coercively controlled into that long of isolation, um, because of, yeah, she literally died there. So to me, it was purposefully done. How or when it happened, we'll probably never know the actual circumstance, because I don't think the parents will ever talk about it unless they get freed from prison. Then they probably will.
Something that was really interesting, but in like a this is really confusing way that I kept seeing the parents say was, well, that's what she wanted. She didn't want to leave the couch. The couch was her safe space. The couch was where she felt the most safe. But I also think that as a parent or a caregiver, if you see someone who is going to the bathroom and then sitting in that, who is getting like essentially bed sores from staying in the same position, who's not getting up to bathe, at some point, it's your responsibility as the caregiver to make it, you can't just say, oh, well, that's just what she wanted. Well, there's what people want, and there's what's going to make them the most healthy. And sometimes as a caregiver, we have to encourage someone to want to take better care for themselves. So can you speak to that a little bit? Like having your safe space, but also recognizing certain things, how they can get detrimental.
Just taking even from my day job. We have, well, I work with a lot of kids that don't want to go to the bathroom or do things like that. Normally, when you have something like that happening, you just change your wording and questioning, or you just bring it to them. Like in this case, for bathing purposes, they could have brought a cloth and put soap on it and just gradually washed certain parts just so she could be clean. And there are portable bathrooms. I know this from working with the elderly. That was one of my first jobs as a caregiver because I've worked in caregiving positions. And you can bring that bathroom straight to her so then she doesn't have to move that far. There was so many different ways to prevent just how gruesome and horribly and horrific she died. They could have done so much, and just saying that she wanted that, okay, she still could have been taken care of. Just because she wanted it doesn't mean she can't be taken care of. That's just an excuse to their not wanting her. To me personally, feels like they didn't honestly want her in the first place.
Yeah. So, I mean, that, in my opinion, the answer to this question is yes, but you would, I'm wondering, would assume that that's just severe neglect. It's a lack of understanding and severe neglect.
And technically coercive control, because the more neglect,
Yeah.
the more even your brain, though you already do this. Well, I'm not saying you personally, I'm just saying you thinking out loud.
Yeah.
But um but
The
in
collective
general,
you.
like in general, I already tend to have negative thoughts. So as an autistic person, you get negative thoughts due to it is due to society thinking you're less than. So you already think you're less than. There's already a self-doubt in there that plays a role in not wanting to move, which I could easily see. I have days where I don't want to go anywhere, talk to anyone, or do anything, and then I force myself to do it, or my mom forces me in a non-force, not really forces, wrong word. My mom asks me to go out, hey, let's get out of the house, of
Aw.
doing something. So
It's that
just
like
having
paralysis
that.
almost. I feel like, because I feel like if you're in this, because I'll feel it too sometimes, that feeling of overwhelm, and you just want to stay kind of alone. You don't want anyone to interact with you. Sometimes I'll get into those energies, and I feel like if that was what Laci was experiencing every day, every day, every day, it would become more of a comfortable place. And then that's where I think that control comes in. And oh, well, that's just what she wanted. It's like, well, you also haven't provided any opportunity for her to see what other things she might like to do. You don't take her anywhere. You don't do anything with her. You don't spend time with her.
Well,
Like
exactly.
what do you think her parents should have done better? I mean, a lot, but it's such a hard question. What do you think parents should have done better? But I guess like pick three major things that you think. I guess I'm having trouble with this question
Okay.
because it feels so intentional what they did, like just
Uh-huh.
total lack of care.
Yes, I
So
fully feel that way.
they even have cared to try to do something different. But I guess, oh, in your experience, because if the parents aren't going to help, what kinds of signs can indicate to someone outside of the family or outside of the caregiver that a person with autism is being neglected? Are
Well,
there?
if they never see her, for one, that's a one huge red flag. If they have, even if it's a neighbor, have seen someone once and then never again, that should be a huge red flag in the first place. Or the second one would be if they don't invite anyone over to their house to like do stuff and mingle, because I guess that's what adults do. I'm not a normal adult. I don't do those things,
Oh, I
but
don't like having people over to my house either.
but yeah, that would be a second one. And then a third one would be health check, since you can technically do that if a neighbor or a random person walking by decides to do a health check. Make sure you know the house and do a health check. Those are 3 huge red flags without actually being in the household or talking to the parents necessarily. That can help someone who is cognitively, I guess, not fully cognitively there, that's on the spectrum, because I'm more cognitively there. I don't know how to describe it. I don't like the terms they use of I would be like on a one scale, 1 to 3. I would be the 1 support, which is stupid because sometimes when you're on the 1 support, going into rant, but you sometimes go into multiple ones. You can even be in 3, even though you're technically in 1. People don't really have a full understanding of the spectrum, again, unless you are it yourself and get the labels that do not fit for you. But
so that's, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, you're good.
So that's actually really interesting because I think you're right. When people think of a spectrum, they're like, you either land here or you're here or you're here. I don't think people in general know, well, you're on the spectrum. You can kind of move in between different parts of the spectrum depending on where you're landing. Is that kind of what you mean?
Kinda. It also depends on age. Like a director friend of mine, him and I talked. You also change like certain things with age, like certain sounds, certain abilities. You either lose them or gain them, or like I'm trying to think as a example. When I was little, like heat, I had no feelings towards heat. Like I could stick my hand on fire and I wouldn't feel it until later.
Oh,
And now that I'm older, I feel heat a lot easier. Just using sensory as an example. This is the only one I could come up with. It might be an intense one, but that's the only one I could come up with. Um, or like school bells used to not bug me when I was little, and now as an adult, I can't handle school bells because they hurt me. Like I did a description in my Perez case of certain sounds do literally physically hurt you. It feels like your insides are being teared out
yeah.
from within. That was one example I could come up with. Each sound hurts in a different way. I can't really describe that. Just like most, I would say at least 90%, including myself, of autistic individuals have emotional empathy. So we literally feel what another person's feeling. So there's a lot of stuff that plays into that. But yeah, the spectrum, just because it's a spectrum, we can all meet each other in the same areas at some point in time. And the funny part is most autistic people can relate. I have too many of them in my life to say this. Any book that says otherwise or anything you learn about otherwise is not true.
Well, do you think that there's the possibility that as Lacey got older and her symptoms kind of started to develop more, and she is being so isolated and doesn't have the support, do you think that some of those symptoms could get more intense for her? Like she's noticing more sounds are bothering her, more sensations are bothering her. And so in her family neglecting her needs, more and more things would start to bother her so that she did just want to stay stationary. Is that a like in the realm of possibilities, or is that me kind of just like imagine like making stuff up?
I think that's a very strong possibility because she's in one spot and staying in one area. So the constant normalcy of those sounds, I would think, would become more intense. And the fact, like I said, the emotional empathy that autistic people feel, I bet she was probably feeling her parents, in my personal opinion, hatred towards her. So if you're feeling that, you definitely have a lot of thoughts of, oh, I suck. I'm doing these horrible things by being myself and existing to my parents. So it's, yeah, there's probably a lot there, in my personal opinion. And again, since neither one of us were there, we don't fully know the situation. But to me personally, I feel, yeah, all that could have heightened greatly because certain sounds, like for me, I'm trying to think. The doorbell doesn't bug me at home. Like my mom has a really cool little thing when I'm with her of if someone's walking at the door that I can't stand, it's like a little sound. I can't make the exact sound, but it bugs me and hurts me, and I hate the sound passionately. But it's because it hurts me, but it's within my house because I have my own little place downstairs. There you go. Everyone gets more of a description of my home. But
Yeah, you're like, let me not tell people exactly how to enter my home.
no. But yeah, just to play into Lacey's life and how that could have played a role. Yeah, agreeing with what you said, but going into a rant because I do that.
No, I mean, again, it just helps more people, I think, understand your perspective. So hearing all of that, how can families or caregivers strike that balance between respecting an autistic person's need for safety, but also preventing the isolation and those, symptoms to like intensify?
Well, for one, learn to meet them where they're at, whatever that may be, because each individual, yes, may be different, but can relate. Um, so figuring out what that individual needs, whatever that may be, because I can't speak for them, just get to know them for one. You'll get to know their needs pretty quickly if you actually get to know them, and make sure that you're on the same understanding, since there is little thinking. Like, I know when I'm on the verge of burnout, I go more literal thinking wise versus anything else, because I have three ways of thinking, and most autistic individuals think from bottom up. So see the solution first before how you got to that solution.
My gosh, I'm definitely autistic.
There you go. See, that
And
you
I'm
are
like, also
autistic.
my husband, when he chews, I can't stand it. And
That's
also
ADHD
heavy
for you,
bass
the chewing.
music, I'm gonna crawl out of my skin if I have to hear, like when a car's driving by and they're like,
Oh, I
I
can't
feel
stand that
like,
either. You probably are, but if you
gosh,
do get a diagnosis, make sure it's a female, and make sure it's a female that's not biased, because the industry is not made for diagnosing females in the first place. It's for males, white males specifically.
do you think
Fun
that
fact. What?
could play a part in what happened to Laci, or was it just her parents' total not even considering bringing her in at all for any type of diagnosis?
Just because I didn't hear your first part, can you repeat the very, very first part?
Let me try to remember the very, very first part.
Before you said the diagnosis.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're like, do you think that the lack of even trying to get a diagnosis for Laci played a part in what happened to her? Because it sounds like her parents didn't even care to bring her to the hospital or bring in a therapist or bring in anybody to support Laci.
I think, yeah, diagnosis plays a huge role. And just to put out there for anyone who is autistic, it's okay to self diagnose, especially if you're a female, because, again, it's a bias industry. So if you're self diagnosis and you think you're autistic, you're autistic. But anyways,
Since you are on the spectrum.
yeah. And most people are right. I self diagnosed myself before getting diagnosed, and I
Yeah,
was right.
it's hard because then I hear so many stories of people self-diagnosing and doctors still not taking them seriously.
Yep, and it's true. That's why the bias within there, and the fact that Laci had her own parents, in my personal opinion, against her. So the diagnosis process, I don't know when she was diagnosed. There is no facts and no information out there on saying that. But if she didn't get help right away, it's hard when you're later in life diagnosed, because you could have had so much help beforehand that you didn't get. Instead, you had to learn everything, at least in my life, the hard way. And learn the social norms of neurotypicals, which make no sense, since lying is apparently a good thing to neurotypicals, in my personal opinion, which I think is stupid. So that's why autistic people don't get looked at as great, because we're honest individuals.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know, I think about that all the time too, because I do think that lying is bad. And I think that honesty is important. And I also think that there are neurotypical people who are brutally honest just so they can bully other people. So
Yep, that's true too.
there's not that distinction. Like it's always like, it's never like, well, autistic people are very honest. It's usually like, oh, like they're just so bluntly honest, they don't have the filter. It's like maybe like scale back that rhetoric, because I don't think anyone is trying to like lie on or not lie, but say this truth on purpose to you and hurt you if it's part of their like DNA and who they are to be more honest, because the intention is not to harm. The intention is, this is what I feel and think, and you asked me what I thought, so I'm going to tell you honestly what I thought, but somehow that's bad. Like, why is that abnormal to society or bad? It just doesn't make sense to me. I think about that all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Like, and the fact even other autistic individuals that I know go through some of the same exact experiences in different places. Like, I've talked to individuals that have had same experiences I have, like baby talk. A lot of those who before I was even diagnosed, I got baby talked to by other adults. You get baby talked to as an autistic adult, which it's very confusing because most of the time we're also processing. Like for me, I'm a slower processor. I talk to someone who's a faster processor, but still language is an issue no matter how you look at it. Um, so hearing the baby talk and being like, is this for real? Is this actually happening? That's so ableist. I could actually picture Lacey going through that, bless you. You're good. I could see her getting baby talk from her parents and just by the situation itself, and her probably not knowing what to do with that either, because it's confusing as an adult to have another adult talk to you like you're a 3-year-old. You
Yeah.
don't know what to do with that, of thanks or no thank you, of what do you do with that?
It's certainly not going to empower someone to want to take care of themselves, get educated, go out and get a job, go and make friends, go and socialize, go and date. It's not going to, talking down to someone, especially if you're the person that they trust, you're the person this person sees every day. In Lacey's case, she only saw these 2 people every day.
Yeah.
So if they're constantly reinforcing this idea that she's not enough, she's a burden, she should stay home, then what else is she's not going to grow in the way she's not going to reach the potential she could have reached. She's not going to be able to take care of herself. Her caretakers did give her, like, they didn't give her anything that she truly needed. They just said she's in her comfort zone, you know?
Exactly. And yeah, and the fact that it was supposedly her comfort zone. um
It's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe any person would be fine sitting in their own feces for years. You didn't
yeah,
go
I
clean
would.
up. You didn't go bring her to the bathroom. She was not, like, she was 96 pounds. You couldn't pick her up off the couch and bring her. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot they could have done, and there isn't. They don't have. Well, one thing that really upsets me with the case is they only got 20 years. They should have gotten life or death sentence, as far as I'm concerned. But because of the disability community, most cases, just like with women in true crime cases, don't get the justice they deserve. Of this is a life that was taken, so here's 20 years.
I know. So actually, that's brings me to my next question, because the police and the prosecutors initially struggled to decide whether it was a crime or a family tragedy. So what message does that send to disabled people?
That your life isn't good enough, and when you die you may or may not get the justice you won't get the justice you deserve, is the message it sends, and says that you're not good enough even as you're living, because clearly in death, whether you're murdered or just die, you're not good enough. So society, there's a huge example right there, society putting that idea in anyone who's disabled's head, of you're not good enough even in death. Because she didn't. I wish they would retake the case and consider, hey, she was there for over a decade. This was clearly planned. Maybe we should have looked further into the case, because now I feel like it's a little too late to look further into the case, because all the evidence that was there would have disappeared by now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you think, or why do you think that cases involving disabled victims receive less urgency or outrage than other forms of abuse?
Due to historically and still today, being looked at as less than in the first place, not even looked at as a human being someone who's disabled. You literally have to fight, just like you do in the LGBTQIA plus community, just like, well, unless you're a colored woman, you fight really hard to just be looked at as a human being. That's why I always use the language human. So people see me as a human, because that's what I am, nothing less than. But yeah, you have to fight for that. Even in life, you have to fight for your right to exist, which is sad. And I strongly believe disabled people shouldn't have to fight for their literal life to be considered a life, and to be considered, hey, they can't do these certain things doesn't make them less. Maybe we should give them money to help them, as in I'm trying to think of what the benefit is. Oh, disability benefits and things like that. That's why those started going in place, which still isn't enough for a disabled human to live in the first place. But I won't go fully into that. But yeah.
So, what do you wish investigators and law enforcement understood about disability, autonomy, and vulnerability?
I wish they would better educate themselves, actually go take courses, not necessarily courses, never mind. Go into meet with someone within your community that's disabled and learn from them. Find someone disabled. Don't go to your books. Don't read about books. Go take a training in special education in certain aspects, because there's some good teachings within special education. So go learn a little there, but I strongly advise them to learn from someone who is disabled themselves, and meet with more than one person who's disabled and get more than one person's perspective, and make sure to be trained in meeting someone where they're at. There are places that train law enforcement and so on. You can go to an advocacy program and they'll train them for free. So there's many resources they can go to. I only know that from being a victims advocate and going through the training, which is similar to some of the training I do for my everyday job. But there's a lot of resources, but still go to the individual themselves and meet with multiple of them and learn from them, not a textbook.
I love that. I think that's the most important. I think that's the most important thing you can do. So, if you could change one thing about how our society protects vulnerable or disabled adults, what would it be?
I think there needs to be more laws into place that actually protect individuals that are disabled. And I think there should be a higher limit for disabilities for those that are on disability. And I think that people who are disabled should also be able to get married, because due to the disability money thing that is barely enough to exist, I think it's like $2,000 a month at most they get if they're lucky. And if they make anything more of that outside of that, then they lose it. I think there should be better laws in place of that, like maybe 5,000 a month or something like that, more of a livable wage per month for those that are disabled and can't go to work every day. And yeah, again, allow a marriage and have more of a system down where you actually look into a case instead of deciding, maybe she didn't die, or maybe this wasn't, or not, maybe she didn't die, maybe she didn't get murdered, maybe it was just a tragedy. Or actually look at the case as if it was a white billionaire or a white person that's not disabled, I guess able-bodied, that's the correct word to use, able-bodied person, to actually have more rights, because as a disabled human, you don't have as many rights as someone who is white, straight, and married, honestly. So
Can you talk more about the marriage aspect? I'm not educated at all on that. Are people collecting with disability not allowed to get married?
They're allowed to an extent. I don't know how to describe it. Because of being on disability, if you get married, you could lose your disability check per month, which is vital. So there's a lot of choices. Just like if you were to want to work maybe an hour or 2 hours a week, you could possibly lose your disability per month. There's a lot of things that play into the role, so you don't have many rights in the first place, including to marriage, because marriage plays a role of if you suddenly are married to this person. I don't know the full part of it yet. I haven't gone and investigated further. I just learned from individuals in my life that are disabled and married. um, and it's harder to get married if you're disabled in general because of the bias and discrimination and ableism that exists, just like you see in Lacey's case, you see in Perez's case, you see in every case and every day. Just like on my channel, I'll be covering even documentaries that aren't necessarily crime, but documentaries. Ableism is strong and has been strong. The current administration has just brought to light how strong ableism is. It's always been there, in case anyone's wondering. It's not new. The extent of how far it's going, some parts of it are becoming a little newer, but it's more of the newness of going back in time to way back when you were treated in an asylum for being disabled or literally killed in the white supremacy era just due to being you. It's as simple as that. Just exists. I've gotten to feel before this administration ableism just for myself existing, and it was being known as expressive language disorder. I've always had ableism experiences. I'm getting a little less now due to my own boundaries I put on myself and others of not letting them step all over me anymore, and not, if someone's not willing to meet me where I'm at, I'm not willing to meet them where they're at. It's as simple as that now. um, and it's for my own mental health purpose, because people think autism is a mental health thing. It's only a mental health thing when they're in burnout. So when you're fully burning out some fully burn out to the extent of no longer being able to function, period. Some, like myself, I've learned coping mechanisms of, if I'm in burnout, I let myself do nothing for a day or two and I'm better now. Yeah, I think that answered the question. I don't know. I've been going on random rants. I don't know.
Oh, I appreciate, because I think every piece of it just helps educate. I feel like I've learned a lot. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wish people understood better about isolism? Isolism. That's
I like that word.
If you were wondering what that word was.
That's a good new word.
I'm gonna start using that term when I like want to just like have my do nothing day.
You should.
Isolation.
No, you can't say
Now
it.
I don't even know what it's. Is there anything we didn't discuss yet that you wish people understood about autism, isolation, or care?
I think people should, in general, just better educate themselves, not by textbook. I'm going to keep on reiterating that, but by meeting someone on the spectrum, wherever they are, it doesn't matter, and learning from them about their needs and caring, and seeing how different each individual is, and seeing if you can meet them where they're at. Make that a actual goal of trying to meet them where they're at. And if you fully make it there, go to the next person to meet them where they're at, and then take that knowledge and teach it to others too, and allow that individual, maybe give them a platform to teach to others too. Because especially if you aren't white, I do have the white privilege that I will bring up too. Those who are Black or brown don't have that stage. So if you do meet someone who's Black or brown, give them that stage. And especially if they're on the spectrum, and if they have multiple disabilities, give them that platform and let them speak, because I've only discovered them through social media, because that's most people who are disabled, including myself, way of communicating with others, and meeting others and making friends online. Yeah, so give them a platform, let them educate. I would love to get more brown and Black perspectives right now, even those who are white, such as myself, trying to get a bigger platform for those that are autistic and wanting to speak. I hope we can get to that point in time where we can better educate and show people that, hey, we're human beings too. Let's not murder us. Woo! And I wish that there was more education for those that are on the spectrum and those that are disabled, to get better educated on red flags versus green flags, because they do not, including myself, get that information ever maybe later in life, if you're lucky, like I did, only due to my cult experience. But other than that, you don't learn green and red flags in the first place of a relationship, whether it's friendship, love, or just in general, because you don't have that. You're born without it in the first place. But yeah, that's what I would like.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Any final thoughts you want to share from your perspective about Lacey's case? Anything we haven't touched base on? Anything you hope for the future? What we can do better as a society? Law enforcement? Any of that? Any final thoughts from you?
Just the final thoughts of she was a human. She was mistreated. She wasn't recognized for being human and mistreated. She was just seen as a horrific events, keyword in there, not this happened to a human and this human was mistreated and how can we help her. Having those questions would be great, especially when it comes to someone who's disabled, and maybe even giving Laci a better remembrance for the sake of her life and what she went through, and that we didn't go through that. We didn't get to see through her eyes of what she saw, of what she felt, of what she went through. Everyone was just focused on, I guess, police, parents, stuff like that, instead of seeing her for the human she was and the suffering she endured for literally just being herself. That's it.
Well, thank you so much for collaborating with me on this and approaching me about it. I'm really honored that you wanted to do this with me. I learned a lot, and it's been like such a pleasure getting to know you better too.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And thanks for doing this with me too. And I'm excited for your channel too, doing that.